So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Airbus Innovation Days. As I was just introduced, Michael Schoenllhorn is my name. I'm the lucky guy that is the new Chief Operating Officer of Airbus since 3 months, so pretty brand new in the game and one of the new guys on Guillaume's new team. I have joined from an industry that was just introduced. But before I go into my talk, please allow me to maybe start with a personal note. Why am I here today? Why do I consider myself an extremely lucky guy? Because I found being the operating officer of Airbus, the merging or the joining of two of my professional passions. The first one was I started out as a military aviator in the German Armed Forces. Was a helicopter pilot. I'm the son of a jet pilot, so aviation has been with me from my early childhood days. And then my second career, after some time in academia, I went into operations. Spent about 20 years in the Bosch group, in mainly automotive, but also in the consumer goods area. And I know I still have a lot to learn when it comes to aviation production, aviation operations. I would say I bring some skills hopefully to the table when it comes to mass, to series production, to high rates, to automation, to digitalization, and jointly with the great expertise that the team has here already, I think that's going to be a good combination. So with that, the obvious first question is, so what's your first impressions 100 days into this new role? And here's a short list of what my first impressions are. The first thing that always strikes, I think, most people when you come to Airbus is how passionate the people are about aviation, about the product, about what they do, and what great expertise and knowledge they bring to the table. So this is something that I can only echo. This is amazing. So it's great to be part of such a team. Secondly, it is, also compared to my previous experiences, an industry and a production that is extremely complex, that is characterized by a lot of customization, more than I was used to. So this is certainly something that doesn't lend itself easily to automation and to digitalization. It also means that people will remain at the heart of what we do. Even when we automate, when we put more robots in and so forth, people are at the center of what we do. And certainly the supply chain is a very complex one. I guess I'm preaching to the choir. It is at times challenged. I think there might be some questions maybe later on around that topic. So some of the action fields that we are tackling, and that has already started prior to me coming, are the first thing. I think it's another good time to remind ourselves, everything is nothing without safety. So this is at the forefront of everything that we do, all of our plans. Safety and quality are the beginning of everything. On that basis, as you might know, in 2015 we have started our lean journey in a very systematic and holistic way with what we call the AOS, the Airbus Operating System. We have started to roll that out in all of our plants. There is a different level of maturity. In general, the more we go upstream, the more mature the plants are. The more we go downstream, there's still some work to be done, but everybody's busy implementing and learning. So that's something that we build on, and that's the pillar that everything, including digitalization, has to stand on. You probably heard Guillaume Faury also talk about some of our needs going forward in terms of becoming a little more simpler, the complexity of our product, the complexity of the ways how we operate, sometimes complexify our ways of thinking. I think there is a need to counteract that at times and making things more simple, making them easier to understand for our people. But that only goes along with the right empowerment and then holding people accountable. So this is something that is clearly something that we're working on. With the rates that we see, especially on single aisle, we're moving more and more towards an industrial flow. We have a flow. It's not always as uninterrupted as we would hope it would be. So there's still some work to be done, but it's clearly something that we are starting to tackle also from an organizational point of view. We need to install in our ways of working more flow orientation, because at the end of the flow is the customer. There's the internal customer at the next station, but everything flows towards the customer. This is at the center of what we think. And then, as I said, our business remains to be people-centric. We will still go forward with highly skilled and highly trained people, but we want to automate more, especially as we're increasing the rates, especially as we are operating within countries that don't have the lowest labor rates, and especially because in many countries the workforce is also aging. So automation is one answer to that holistic problem. That was the wrong direction. I guess you've seen these numbers before. I continue to be impressed with what has been accomplished in terms of a 16 years continuous ramp up of Airbus. You see only the last 10 years depicted here, and you all read about our record number of 800 delivered aircraft in 2018. We have given a guidance out to the markets that we go for 880 to 890 this year, and I'm happy to confirm that number. This is exactly what we're on track to accomplish, that number. And I will speak a little bit of how we want to do that and what are we doing to also ensure that going forward. If you look at how we envision and how we try to depict and speak to our people in terms of how do we produce and how do we want to also develop our production system, you see here the four main pillars this all stands on. Again, repeating it, it's all operator-centric. What we do needs to serve the blue-collar operator who's working, and if it's not helping him or her, then we need to rethink how we're doing things. Secondly, as I mentioned, AOS is the basis for everything. It encompasses all the lean principles and everything that we do to create flow, to build perfect quality, and to also help further enable the people. On that basis, we want to further develop the industrial system design, something that I think we can improve a little bit in terms of being more proactive and not being behind the curve and investing to catch up with the rates. This is something that we're looking into very deeply, including the means of digitalization and automation, Industry 4.0, connected industry, whatever you want to call it. And then the fourth piece is a very essential one, and you will hear more to that later on in the talk of Alain Tropis and Marc Fontaine. It's what we call DDMS, Digital Design, Manufacturing and Service. So a co-design of product and production system, and by the way also the systems for services, but for my area of responsibility, product and production system at the same time, simultaneously, based on digital twins, on a digital continuity of data that we can process seamlessly along a chain. I will speak to that in a little bit. Three main enablers that we look at on this journey. One is workplace design. Secondly, digital continuity, as I mentioned that. And then thirdly, automation. I will speak to all three of those. Workplace. Well, obviously it all starts, as I said, with safety and quality, and safety also has the aspect of taking care of our people. So safety and ergonomics and providing workplaces that sustain the health of our people are essential. We're implementing lots of things, and some of those you can see outside, like exoskeletons and chairs without a chair, so things that you can tie to your lower back and then sit on these things, and they can walk with you for work positions where you have the ability to sit, or where you work at a lower elevation. Very simple, but yet very effective means to support the health of our people. Smart glasses are in use in all of our plants. We use them obviously to make information more readily available for our operators. We mix the reality with mixed reality with overlays of information that people need, like where the routing of a wire harness goes, where certain things need to be installed, where brackets need to be, where fasteners need to be. All these are things that are much more simple if you use them this way through smart glasses than if you have to go to a computer, look them up, or even open a paper plan and look for what belongs where. So something that makes not only the efficiency go up, but is also something that produces and helps keep the quality in times of high automation, and even increases or decreases the likelihood of mistakes. And then thirdly, you heard probably Guillaume say that one of the big targets that we have in front of us is the decarbonization of aviation as a whole. And of course, as production, we want to contribute to that. We can't decouple ourselves from that. So we have defined for this year a target of a 5% CO2 reduction, absolute, while we're growing our production. So that's a big additional viewpoint that will be more pronounced going forward, also holding ourselves and our people accountable for what we do to the climate and in terms of energy usage and CO2 reduction. One example, that of course encompasses a lot of things: facility management, lighting, heating, air conditioning, but also putting the right means in place to more sustainably produce heat and electricity. The second enabler I mentioned was the digital continuity. Very essential when you talk about Industry 4.0, and it has several aspects. You probably heard sometimes when people speak about connected industry, horizontal and vertical integration of data. Let me start with the vertical integration of data. That is, how do you make all the information, all the data that a company has available for the person on the shop floor to do the best job possible? So how do you process your data coming from ERP, from the Enterprise Resource Management and Planning, through the manufacturing execution system, the MES, to the point of use to where the people work? Vertically. Horizontally, how do you create and support flow? Flow of material, flow of goods, flow of information across different functions, across different tools, and make them readily available and seamlessly available for all people. This is what I refer to as the horizontal integration. And then there is the whole note of the product life cycle, where you first develop the product, then jointly going forward, but in the past sequentially develop or design the production system, and then later on a product gets used and then serviced and so forth. Historically, the systems that were used to do all this were more monolithic and more decoupled from each other. Now we're creating one system that uses the same data and processes those data seamlessly across the different systems. So this, of course, provides for much more opportunities for simulation, for digital mock-ups and digital twins. Again, you will hear much more about that later on with Alain and with Marc. I will say one sentence regarding Skywise, which you probably heard about in conjunction with our effort or our offering in terms of a data platform that airlines can use to do preventive maintenance, to learn more about the aircraft. We also use the same system in production. So we use the same data lake, we use the same algorithms and the same artificial intelligence to really look at what is the wealth of the data that we have in our production system. How can we use those data to not repeat mistakes, to have solutions suggested to operators when they find something is not right, and many other ways in terms of preventive maintenance for equipment and improving processes in production. Third enabler dimension was automation. And automation is not an end in itself. I mean, automation, again, has to serve the flow and has to serve our people. Historically, automation, as you know, in aviation tended to be very heavy, very rigid, for obvious reasons, large parts, heavy parts, precision needed. With all the enablers that I mentioned before, especially with DDMS, we have a unique opportunity to go to much lighter automation because we can simulate before, because we can measure in real time the real dimensions of parts. We don't need to rely on the exact way how it's depicted on a drawing when the parts in reality bend a little bit and things are slightly different. So that is a unique opportunity to make the automation lighter, to make it more collaborative, to make it more work hand in hand with the people. And we're using that in a lot of ways. You see the fourth final assembly line in Hamburg, which you probably heard about. After some teething problem, I would say it's really coming in line nicely. The OEE is getting up to where it needs to be. I will not be able to point too much because you will be able to watch a little video thereafter. But there's also many more points in terms of automation that we do to process the flow of material and to create transparency of where is the material at any point in time. Using IoT technologies, using data to really help our people. And then Skywise, as I said, a big and powerful asset to improve production. So the fourth line in a little video. So what you see is that this fourth line is much more than only the two robots, the two 7-axis robots that do the pre-drilling, the drilling, the countersinking, and the positioning of the rivets. There's much more positioning automation to really measure real time the dimensions of the parts and then to do the assembly supported by all these technical means. And again, it's a fairly complex enterprise, and that's why there were some issues to begin with. And the technology that I will speak to right now, DDMS, is helping us to be much faster and be able to ramp up in a much steeper way going forward when we implement such complex automation. What you see is a station from a hangar 245, also in Hamburg, and you see on the one hand side the reality, if you will, and on the other side you see the digital mock-up. So this is coming from the DDMS system. There is a model, a CAD model of the robot, of course, of our product, and then what we also are able to do within that system, we can simulate and model the PLC control of the robots. And with that, you can test every PLC program prior to doing it in reality, so you can find all the mistakes, all the errors, all the collisions that can possibly happen by doing that. So this is the power of DDMS going forward, especially when you design the production system at the same time as the product or a product extension. We're using that now for all the modifications that we do on all of our aircraft, especially also on the single aisle, which was developed in a different way, 2D. But now with all the changes, we're going to this technology. And this makes it much more seamless and faster to implement these changes. With that, let me come to a close and try to summarize and give you some of the key takeaways. Aviation is still an industry that will depend a lot on people. And we are only too aware that the future competitiveness of Airbus, which currently is driven a lot by our excellent products and by a production that has been able to keep pace and to ramp up, but we need to come to a more sustainable and forward-looking way of designing our production system. So this is the challenge of the future. The continued relatively high labor content that we have really makes it essential that we put everything to the service and to the support of our people. Our people are well-trained, they're extremely well-trained, very capable, very motivated, as passionate as everybody in Airbus, and they deserve to be served by the best tools and methods. And then thirdly, as I said, what will really enable us to be a lot more powerful in that regard in the future is co-design, the simultaneous design of product, production system, and services, DDMS as we call it, and also from the get-go to be more focused in design for manufacture and assembly, and find good compromises between what is the best product and the lowest weight, but what is also needed to support production. And then digital continuity is really the handover point, as I would almost say, to the talk that you will hear after me. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. It was my first talk to such an audience. I'm really looking forward to questions, and let's see how I fare after 3 months in the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And now let's start the Q&A session. Who has the first question? We start with Sebastian Steinke, front row. Just shout out.
Okay, my question is concerning the ideal fabrication. Would you prefer a fabrication line where everything is under one roof and maybe under Airbus's roof? Or will networking enable to have decentralized factories that are maybe spread all over the world in some way? I was thinking about your competitor.
The question is ideal fabrication, and maybe now you can continue.
I was thinking about your competitor who moves back a lot of production, the wing production, next to his final assembly line, which is quite a different approach from the program ahead of that. And I was wondering if Airbus is thinking about ideally having everything under one roof, or maybe spreading it worldwide, as networking might enable this. Thank you.
I think a very good question in that you've tried, in my view, to really describe a little bit the extremes. Under one roof, it's probably not going to happen. And being very dispersed is the other extreme. So what we're clearly looking out for going forward is we have a historic footprint, which is as it is. There's good reasons why it came about. It's not always the industrial optimum. So certainly things that we're looking into how to optimize that. But at the same time, you also need to acknowledge that sometimes the most competitive supplier is somewhere else. And if you do the whole calculation, then it might still make sense. So we think to look at a value stream design that looks at all these things. And yes, there is value in having a supplier close by.
Next question goes to John Ostrower, the Air Current.
Question about the new 220 line, actually the existing 220 line also. As you look at the technologies that you put in place in Hamburg, is that going to be a template that you use for the A220 for the ramp up and the technologies that you're putting into place? And similarly, how do you see the evolution of technology as far as building the wing and also having the ability to evolve that process and ramp it up and potentially duplicate it if need be?
Many questions in one. As far as the A220 line, I mean, the Canadian line is as it is currently, but it will certainly, depending on the rates that we will see, further have to develop. The mobile line will clearly benefit from some of the things that we're doing in Hamburg, also in other locations. If you look at the 350 line, for instance, which was a big step forward in Airbus for a more modern production system. So yes, this wisdom will be coming to mobile. When it comes to wing technology, it is a question that covers both the product, what materials, how do you want to do the wing, and then also what are the production technologies. I think the A220 has a very advanced wing to connect the two topics. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. It is actually what we're looking into also in our studies under the headline of Wing of Tomorrow. So yes, all this information goes into this expert team that is designing, co-designing, using exactly what I said along DDMS, the Wing of Tomorrow.
Next question to Robert Wall, Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, hi. I had a question on 320 production and the rate increase. If you look at the lines as they are now and going up to rate 63, how much more efficiency, if you look beyond that, can you get out of the existing lines and existing infrastructure to support a rate increase without having to spend a lot more on CapEx, a new line, a new building? What do you think is doable? Is rate 70 doable in the current footprint?
I mean, you know how much we have planned. This is exactly covering the rate 63. And then it boils down to the question, if you look at the whole pipeline, is everybody able to sustain a higher rate? And that's currently not the case. So what we do and what we've done in the past is, we will look starting in the second half of this year, looking into, is there a possibility to go higher? Currently, we plan rate 63.
Can we bring back the mic?
Can you get more efficiency out of the line to go to rate 70 without having to spend a massive amount of money in CapEx on additional lines or buildings?
That's too early to tell. It's just something that, is there more efficiency in these lines? Yes. How far does it get us? That's going to be the result of this study.
Next question goes to Tim Heifer from Reuters, on your left.
Hello, Tim Heifer from Reuters. Thank you. How much a concern is it to you that Boeing could get a sort of a big bang improvement in production technology through its NMA program if it decides to go ahead with that? What can you do about that? Is the sort of incremental stuff that you've been, more evolving sort of process, is that going to be enough? And specifically, are you interested in the dry fiber resin infusion technology which Bombardier uses in Belfast? And if you're not interested, do you care who else might take ownership of that technology?
Maybe start with the latter, resin infusion technology, but also RTM are definitely technologies that we look into. And they are being studied in the Wing of Tomorrow activity that I mentioned before. So it's definitely a technology that is of interest. Now, I don't know if the question was also regarding the Belfast facility, but let's stay with that for now. And then in terms of the concern with the NMA, first of all, let's see what comes. Every new aircraft, and that has been in the industry, and we've done that with the 350 as well, is also a new opportunity to take production to a new level. From what we know and what I expect is a lot of the things that we will see will also have to do with some of the topics that I talked about, like DDMS, like co-design, like more automation. And so there's always the healthy concern of us being in a very tough competition, but also not more than that.
Next question goes to Scott Hamilton.
Hi. What is Airbus going to do with the A380 facilities when that program finally winds up?
We have a project started with the decision to ramp down the 380. That will also look into that question. How can we best make use of the available floor space? Is there any kind of expansion, any kind of good usage of that? Will it be needed for the growth? And the answer will be very different from site to site. So there's not a cut and dry answer, but we'll make use of the sites as much as we can, as much as it makes sense.
Next question goes to Richard Schurmann from Air Insight.
Hello, I'm here at the front. You are introducing a new method with robots in Hamburg, or have done this already. I see the small robot which will be introduced in Saint-Nazaire. But when I did an interview last year with Delft University, they say it's very difficult to introduce robotics on an existing program, on an existing production line. How are you going to do this? Because I understand that Hamburg is not producing the rate and the numbers compared to the human production line, just to say that.
Hamburg is producing in the meantime at the rate that was intended to be, and that's getting to the rates of the human line, but in a much more productive and in a very high quality fashion. So we have, when the program is right and everything is set, we have 0 non-conformances. That's not always the case when we have manual production, where we need to then fix the things that have happened. So yes, it's always a lot easier to start on a clean slate. But there are good ways, as I've tried to get across, also with existing programs, especially when you have a design modification, to use that part and then combine it with a new production technology and still improve.
Next question goes to Andreas Speth, freelance from Germany.
Hello, I've just been back to Mirabel a few weeks ago and looked again at the production line, which was formerly the C-Series, and I wonder, did you take any lessons from how they do it? Would it be possible to merge some of their things into your production, or vice versa? So is there kind of a way to kind of get both production methods closer to each other, or will you have it as a separate and separately organized production line in the future?
As I tried to get across before, the Mirabel line is currently as it is, and it was set up prior to us having that stake in the game. But certainly, it's part of the bigger Airbus family now, and there will be lessons learned shared from both. And one possibility is already the mobile line. Other than that, to be honest, in the first 3 months, I've visited all locations, but I haven't been to Mirabel. So I will take your question and take a deep look in terms of what can we learn from that.
Next question goes to Thomas Hanke from the German Handelsblatt. On your left.
Over here. A question regarding the consequences of DDMS. Will it change the trade-off or the balance between, on one hand, incremental improvement and, on the other hand, a clean sheet design? To put it differently, will the risk of a completely new design or of disruptive technologies be lesser, both in terms of production stability and financial risk?
It is, of course, an important step in de-risking any new development, and in that way also de-risking completely new programs, very clearly. But it also lends itself to modifications and to let's say smaller or improvement type modifications. By just being able to map it all out before and simulate it, you always take risk out. And you can test things before they're cast in iron, and then you find out, oh, maybe this or that didn't quite work as I thought it would.
Is there any? Yes, please.
Thank you. Do you think the introduction of DDMS, to what extent it could lower the production cost of the aircraft? Thank you.
I can't give you a specific number, but it certainly will lower the cost, because your ramp-up curve is much steeper, because you can pre-test a lot of things that you previously could only do in real life and as part of your learning curve. Secondly, you can really find better compromises based on data. What is the trade-off between optimizing the product and optimizing production? And what can we do to really get to that sweet spot with design for manufacturing also? So yes, the main intention is to lower the costs and to ramp up more quickly.
Is there any next question in the room? Yes, we have Tom Valentine from Orient Aviation.
Just a question, I guess, outside Airbus. when it comes to putting your aircraft together, I mean, basically you're at the mercy of your suppliers, your supply chain. If things go wrong in your supply chain, you can be as efficient as you want, it all goes to pot. So to what extent are you taking your theories, what you're working on, and discussing it with your suppliers?
This is clearly on the, in the makings and the plans of DDMS. First, we want to be able to really master it internally, but co-design is then also taking place with core suppliers. Probably not with everybody that makes a part that is well spec'd out and can be built to print, but when it comes to really the intersection point of what do you contribute, what do we make in-house, and how does the product design interface with us, we need to work together.
Another question from Robert Wall.
Yeah, just another question. Here, in terms of the vertical integration debate that's been going on, you know, more or less. Just curious, since you're now a new management team, pretty much entirely between you and Guillaume, what your view is. How much of that do you want to do? How much vertical integration do you think makes sense? Do you think it makes sense to hold on to premium and whatever Airoli is now called?
Stalia. Let me start with the second part, aerostructures. I think a lot of good work has been done in the past, but we never went all the way, as you know, as was the original plan. I think there's also some benefit in that. Long story short, this is what we want to answer within the next 6 to 8 months. There's no fixed answer as we speak, but we need to, let's say, decide on this question. Vertical integration as a whole, I mean, there's no simple answer that covers it all. I think, along with what we have also done in the past, coming from an analysis of what is core, what is non-core. If something tends to be more non-core, of course, there's a tendency to give it to the supply base. But there can be the opposite effect in terms of looking into specific parts that we have traditionally, for whatever reason, outsourced, to pull that in because there might be a better option in terms of service revenues. So it's a little bit of a total cost or total benefit question that we need to take a look at.
Next question to Tim Hiefer, Reuters.
Thank you. Just on deliveries. Deliveries are still quite lumpy and skewed towards the end of the year. I just calculated that in April, by the end of April, you delivered 26% of your target, which is actually less than the average of the previous 5 years. The contribution of January to April towards the annual total. So really no progress in speeding up deliveries at the beginning of the year.
Well,
what can you do about that?
First off, the first statement is right. We still have a planning of the year that is back-end loaded. I don't quite understand your numbers because my numbers tell me something different. We are now, if you look at the total volumes from 800 to 880, so we want to produce 10% more, 80 to 90 aircraft more. Of that, probably, let's look especially into single aisle, 70 come from the single aisle that we want to produce more. Of that 70, we have half in the bag already after 4 months. So we are 35% in volumes in deliveries ahead of the curve compared to last year. We might want to...
Sorry, you delivered 232
aircraft
in the first 4 months of the year. Your target is 880 to take the more generous end. That's 26%.
That is true. That is true.
That's no different from the pattern in previous years. And in fact, it's less than you did before you had all these engine problems. So it does seem that Airbus is slower than it would like to be at the start of the year. You don't agree with that?
Are we a little bit slower than we would like to be? Yes, because we want to flatten out the delivery profile over the course of the year. We're not there yet. Are we making progress compared to last year? Yes, definitely, especially on single aisle. And other programs deliver more or less at the rate of the last year. So, point taken in terms of flattening it out, that is still something that we need to improve on.
And Tim, you might also acknowledge that this is the first year where we have increased the objective by 10% plus. Yeah, and we did 11.4% more production last year. So when you compare previous year figures, compare apples with apples, and I think only the last 2 years we have increased production by 10%. So what stands is the 35% more deliveries than compared to the same time frame in last year. So we are on the right trend curve.
Let's check the numbers after.
Now, I am now bamboozled by all these figures. So can I just ask you a much more simple question? What would be the one or two main things that you inherited from your previous job? The factories you worked with, the way of planning, the way of shaping the industry that you think need to be applied here?
I try to get bits and pieces across in my talk. First off, consequently deploy the lean basis in all of your plants. We're still not there yet. It was underway, as I said, but it's something that everything stands on this pillar. Secondly, don't automate just because of the sake of automation. Look precisely at what you want to accomplish with an automation project. And then have the skills in-house. Don't only rely on the supply base providing a complete turnkey automation solution. If you don't have the skills in-house, chances are if it's complex, it's going to be difficult. So that's something that we need to beef up. And then thirdly, the higher your rates get, the more this concert and this flow has to click like clockwork. And that is fostered and enabled if you take measures also internally that shift a little bit the focus from the functional plan view to the flow, to the horizontal view, and that gets right of way. So some organizational things to support the whole idea.
Thank you very much. I see another question, Ben Katz from Bloomberg.
Two from me. Last year, the engines on the A320neo was a really big story. There was a very big focus on it. It seems like that's kind of died down a little bit, but maybe you can give us some color on where the engine makers are, specifically CFM and Pratt, on the A320neo, and I guess the same question for the A330neo and Rolls-Royce. And then the second part is, I'm going to annoy everyone else in the crowd, because it was a similar question I asked to the previous guys, but didn't get a clear answer, which is, after the MAX crash, the regulators are under a lot of pressure, and I'm just wondering what kind of impact do you see that having on the regulatory process and certification, especially in the new era of new production systems?
Again, let me start with the latter question. We don't know what and how the attitudes of the FAA and EASA and all the agencies change. But I think they will become stricter. So they will scrutinize some changes that we are implementing, potentially a little bit more than they did before. Now, did I perceive so far a lack of scrutiny? No. But could there be an effect that now they double and triple check even more? Could be. It remains to be seen. Engine makers, to date, the engine makers are by and large delivering at the rate that we have asked them to deliver. There are specific issues with each and every one of them, which are different in nature, but by and large they are delivering what they need to.
Next question goes to Andreas Speth.
Can you give us an update on the role of 3D printing in Airbus production? I've been to Hamburg probably 2 years ago at the factory. I was given an introduction and was told about all the many applications, possible applications of this new technology. Can you give us an update where are you now and where might you be in a few years' time from now in 3D printing?
We are now where we have, I think, overall, I have to pull the number off my head, but I think we have a small 3-digit number of flying parts. the majority of our use cases are not so much flying parts, are more in jigs and tools and support material, I would say. I think we're making progress. Is it the silver bullet that maybe it was presented to a couple of years ago that fixes everything, you can just introduce it? No, it's not. Because the scrutiny with which especially flying parts are being looked at and the proof that it takes, or the effort that it takes to prove that they're the same essentially and delivering the same functionality and safety as traditionally manufactured part is quite an effort. So technically there's a lot more things possible, but it has to be done with safety in mind first and with the regulatory processes and everything that goes along.
Is there any other question in the room? Yes, please. Xinhua Newswire from China.
Thank you. I'm Hu Tao from the Xinhua News Agency. I think I learned quite a lot when you were talking about the digitalization. It seems that this kind of technology is shaping the future. Then I wonder, for the digitalization has replaced a lot of humans' role in this industry. I wonder, will this change, alongside changing the way of making airplanes, also changing the human beings' role in the aviation industry? Besides creating new jobs, any more revolutionary changes will happen to this, alongside the digitalization? Thank you.
Very good question. I mean, yes, it creates new jobs. It does create new job profiles. So for instance, we are changing the training profile of our apprentices and put more IT and put more automation, put more robotics in that. If your question was also going in the direction of, will we now move towards manless fabs or something like that? I don't see that. There's still a lot of things that currently in the complexity of aircraft production will remain manual, but the manuals being supported by digital means, by the glasses, by means that keep them healthy and safe, by information, by a lot more making use of their productive time. If you look at, do an analysis of aviation production, many times, also in the past, you find that people are walking too much because the point of use and the material is not really brought to them to the point of use, but they have to walk maybe only 3 meters, but back and forth so many times 3 meters is not a productive use of the time. So I think there's so much more that with intelligent tracking, transparency, material delivery, and then supporting the people with information, there's huge benefits to be gained, and people will still be around, but they will be more productive.
We have a next question from India.
What is your learning after the MAX crash? Did you have any internal discussions at Airbus, and have you changed any processes in the
We have not changed any processes. The only thing that we have reinvigorated on the high level that was there before already is safety comes first. And if we have changed anything, that is, we start now every meeting with safety, when before it was maybe 80 or 90% of the meetings. So it is a reminder for all of us that safety is at the top of what we do and top of mind. But in terms to real ways of doing, we have not changed anything.
Very good concluding words for our